Okay, wait, sorry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Road to Retail podcast. And welcome and all our small emerging brand and our audience. And thank you so much for following us on our LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify pages, and where else you can listen to our podcast. And today we are continuing our Founders series, especially here for the summer. And we've got our special co-host today, which is Krista Anderson. And shout out to Bruce, who will be back here in a couple weeks with some other great interviews of some of our colleagues and friends from the industry. But today we have an illustrious brand founder today, and I'm excited to talk to Beryl. But first, Krista, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience that may not know you?
Thank you, Tracy, and I'm happy to be here. I'm Krista Anderson, founder and CEO of Healthy on the Go, an international food brokerage and distribution company based in the US and France. Our mission is to help create a preventative healthcare system by making healthy foods more accessible to people across the country. And I'm also the author of Claim Your Healing and Living My Best Life in the South of France. And super excited about our guest today, Tracy. She is dynamite, and I have had the opportunity to work with her for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years now with her and her team and her brand. So
awesome. Yes, we're very, very excited. This is a veteran of the CPG industry. And so Beryl, welcome. And thanks so much for joining us here on our Road to Retail podcast. And I know our small emerging brand audience is really going to learn a lot from, the experiences that you've had over the years. So tell us a little bit about you and where you're located and a little bit about your brand.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Tracy and Krista. So I'm Beryl Stafford. I am the founder of Bobo's Oat Bars, which is a wonderfully delicious handmade oat bar. I wanted to call it gooey, but it used to be gooey because it was with corn syrup and butter. But it's breakfast on the go, nutritious bar, and it's gluten-free and it's vegan. And we have about 45 SKUs now. I started with 4. But I started in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I live 20 years ago. This is our birthday year, and we came out with a birthday cake flavor, which is delicious.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
this one, I didn't know about this.
Oh, it's actually my favorite flavor now. And it's not really us because birthday cake is so sugary and sweet, but hey, after 20 years, we can venture out. But a little about my background. I was a recently divorced mom when I founded Bobo's, and I had no experience in sales or business or food, raised 2 daughters and got divorced and had to kind of reinvent myself. My daughter is Bobo, and she was making these gooey oat treats out of a cookbook on a Sunday afternoon, and they were delicious. She was taking them to her classmates. She was in 7th grade, and they were asking for more every day. We made them, and my friends were coming over saying, you should sell these, and I thought, where? In a bake sale at school? I don't know anything about
That's crazy.
And so I did get the, crazy idea to do it with my girlfriend, who is an artist. She didn't want to have anything to do with it, but she wanted to do the label for me. So we sat down with a Sharpie in my kitchen, and she just drew it just freehand right there on our kitchen table. And she said, let's go get labels printed. I said, really? This is crazy. And so we did. And I wrapped them in saran wrap. They had a 3-day shelf life. And she drove me to the first coffee shop, and she said, get out, and I was super shy. And I said, what if I run into somebody I know? I was so nervous to do it, but I brought them. They were so delicious that I thought, hey, people like free food and they like yummy food. So she dropped me off at the coffee shop. The baristas have a long line always. And the barista said, yeah, whatever, just leave them here, and go away. And they're vegan and gluten-free, which were just becoming kind of a thing then. That was 20 years ago. So I thought, that's a good idea. And the barista said, well, we don't have any gluten-free items. So yeah, go ahead and leave them here. So I thought, well, yuck, that was awful. I'm never doing that again. He called me 2 weeks later and said, we sold them all. Please bring us more.
Oh,
And by the
wow.
way, he said, by the way, what do I sell them for? And I went, I have no idea.
Oh my gosh.
I think he felt sorry for me. And that was my very first sale. It was a coffee shop in Boulder. And then from there, I just hit all the coffee shops locally, little small local grocery stores, and just kind of figured it out. And went to every trade show, went into Whole Foods locally. And the girl at the bakery, I sold them in a bakery when I first started, said, oh my God, I've been buying these at the co-op. I'm so glad you brought these in. We've been waiting for you. And I mean, that never happens. I got super lucky. And she said, okay, so get your packaging together. And what's the shelf life? She asked me all these questions. I had no idea. I just said, I'll have to get back to you on that. And she said, okay, come back when you get your packaging together. You're going to have to demo every weekend in every Colorado Whole Foods. And I said, okay. So anyway, that was kind of my first success, getting into Whole Foods. It was only 12 stores, I think, in Denver. But so then I realized, maybe I've got something. I made $14 the first month.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna make
and now you guys are doing, can you share what
well, I'll tell you that we're selling about 100 million of them a year.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
From $14 to that. That's
Yeah.
what a great story.
It's been an amazing journey. So I'll keep going if you want to hear more.
Absolutely. So, this is fantastic. What a great story.
Yeah. Well, I always
reinvent yourself, huh?
Yeah, I know. So, I felt like there were two paths I could go. One destructive, one, I've got to make something of myself here. And, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I had no idea that it would actually make a living for me, and help me raise my kids. I just thought maybe. And so other bars were just becoming popular. Like, I don't know if you remember 20 years ago, we only had Lara Bar and Nature's Valley and, Power Bar. There weren't that many, but I was kind of following Lara Bar, and she was becoming very successful. And I thought, hey, if she can do it, why can't I?
Right.
And so from there, like I said, I went to every trade show I could. I did everything myself. I took a second mortgage on my house. I maxed out my credit cards and just kept going, like one coffee shop at a time. And my packaging, my bars are easy to ship. And so I started shipping them to California, to Austin, places where I thought they might sell. And I did it very slowly in the beginning, as opposed to, you see some CPG companies get a lot of funding and boom, grow too fast and they fail.
Yeah.
Or else they don't grow at all. And so I did it myself, thinking half the time, maybe I'm crazy to be doing this, because I wasn't really making any money. And but I was having fun. I tell people it was like playing store, because just trying to figure out, what am I going to charge for these? And I just really didn't know what I was doing for the first couple of years. And so then from there, I kept going. I kept growing and figuring it out. I joined networking groups, and there's a group here in Boulder called Naturally Boulder for CPG brands like Bobo's, and went to every workshop I could and listened to lectures and networked. And, just figured it out. And people ask me, well, how did you figure out the packaging? And you know what? You just call packaging salespeople and they'll teach you, you just have to be resourceful. And, I was going through a hard time because of my divorce, and I just put my focus and energy 100% into it. I worked till midnight and just kind of figured it out. And I always tell people, if I can do it, you can do it, because I knew nothing about this whole industry.
That's
kind of, and I just put one foot in front of the other for 12 years I did it myself. And
12 years. Wow.
yeah, and I didn't raise any money. I just borrowed from the bank and paid back and just borrowed, paid back, and just gradually grew it. And then after 12 years, I was tired. I was ready to get out and sell it. And instead of selling, I ended up raising some money and hired a CEO. And we built a huge team and moved into a much larger bakery and bought a lot of equipment, hired people, and it blew up after that.
Wow.
Wow.
No more slow growth,
Right.
investors don't want slow.
No, typically not. But that's just, one of the things I wanted to highlight is that you started small, and it's a journey. This is not instant success, right? This isn't like, oh, I've got this product. I've met a lot of founders, similar story to yours, that I made this in my kitchen, whatever, and, grew. But I just love the story that you started small, one store at a time, and then grew it. The fact, though, that you did it by yourself for 12 years is amazing. I mean, that just speaks to your tenacity and your drive.
Well, that was the easiest thing for me to do. Hiring people, as you know, it's not very fun, and
No.
it's fun to manage people. But I had 5 people under 4 people in the front. I had an operations guy, I had my bookkeeper, and kind of a sales assistant, answer the phone person, and then 50 bakers in the back. And yeah, I went to every trade show by myself, and managed everything.
One thing
But
I noticed about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, and I was just gonna say, it's one way to learn every aspect of your business.
Hmm.
I mean, I was driving the boxes to FedEx every day and shipping them out. And it's crazy to think that I did all that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it was.
that's a good point, though, for our small emerging brand audience. You did it all yourself, and from that, you learned how to do everything. So then, instead of trusting somebody, like hiring somebody, hey, here, handle logistics, so I just think that's a great point to, small emerging brands. Some people can do that and some people can't. So that's off to you.
And one thing I noticed about your story is that you didn't have, I mean, I think I struggle with this in business a bit, and I'm sure a lot of brands do, is this growing slow. You feel like, at least I feel, this fear of missing out on opportunities, that my competition will get there before me and hold that store space before me, and then will I be able to have that opportunity later. And like, you can see, you've been in business 20 years and it's still a great time to be doing what you're doing. You didn't miss out on anything. So growing slow is okay.
Yeah, maybe I did. I don't know, because I had my head down. And, I look back on it, and other people have pointed this out, that I was almost in a vacuum. It was very lonely because I didn't have a lot of collaboration. I really relied on a lot of business owners that were my friends. But, I didn't know who to hire. I just thought it's easier to do it yourself. That expression.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Founder's disease. That's the founder's
Yeah. And
Is it-
also I didn't know if I could trust anybody else.
Yeah.
Found
a great CEO. He's incredible. So
I found a great CEO, and I feel like that was one of the best decisions I've made. Somebody pointed out to me the other day that running a successful business is all about making the right decisions. You know what I mean? When you're running a company, you make decisions every day, and some are very important. And I feel like that was one of the best decisions I made. He's a great leader, and I never hesitated once I hired him. There was no feeling of, oh, yikes, how do I get out of this?
Yeah.
So what's the best advice you would give to a small emerging brand?
Well, I'd say that you have to be hungry, humble, and work the hardest in the room. By hungry, you have to be deeply passionate. You have to really want it, because it's a lot of work, and it's easy to throw in the towel it's just so much work and it's so stressful, and humble because you have to practically beg for that retail shelf space and you
Yeah.
can't be embarrassed about that.
Right.
There's a lot of hats to wear, and a lot of them are not glamorous. And I always tell people that are thinking about starting a business, don't expect it to be glamorous.
Right. Absolutely. People think it's get glamorous. So many founders think it's, glamorous. And I hear a
Be
lot
my
of
own
people,
boss.
yeah, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm not going to work in the business. I'm going to work on the business,
Yeah.
and I'm going to hire all these people to do all this stuff for me. And I'm going to work on strategy and product development. You've heard it all, right, Beryl?
Oh,
And
yeah. And no, you were in the weeds. I mean, when I first started, I did demos every single weekend. And what that means is you're putting a trash can in your car, a table, a tablecloth, and you're driving around to every Whole Foods. You're putting that table in a shopping cart from your car. It's just a lot of things that
It's not glamorous at
there's
all.
no glamour in that, but you don't care. You don't care. You just do it.
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I wanted to go back to that you talked about that when you were talking about not knowing what to do, and it sounds like you really reached out for community, right? And did you have any mentors or people like that to help you along the way? I know you mentioned Naturally Boulder, but I think a lot of times brand founders try and go it alone, and I think that's a mistake. But I want to hear from you on what your experience was.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was lucky because here in Boulder, there are a lot of natural food brands. And with this group called Naturally Boulder, it was very important.
Yeah.
Networking is hugely important. That's how I learned, everything, everything about retail. And I actually shared a kitchen space with Justin's Nut Butter, which I'm sure you all know,
Yeah.
and a company called Phil's Fresh Food that eventually became Evol Frozen Foods.
Oh yeah. Big
And
brands.
and we collaborated a lot. We didn't know what we were doing. They were in the same boat. And we actually formed a company and we hired the same employees. So one day they're making nut butter, the next day they're making oat bars. And it was kind of funny looking back on that. It wasn't such a great idea, but no, every time they had a certain success in a certain part of the business, I leaned on them for that. We really leaned on each other a lot. And
Yeah. So
yeah,
it sounds like that's important. So I guess what I would tell our audience, don't go it alone.
not completely.
Yeah.
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 And
We've had some one guest recently, and she said that the mentor that she didn't have any mentors, and then she's like, I got to get some mentors, and they helped her along the way, and she said that made a huge difference. So community mentors, other friends and colleagues.
yeah, looking back, I wish I had gotten more. I probably would have learned more, but I just relied on my friends who were in business. But I probably should have joined more groups.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that comes when you raise capital. You just become more popular, growing so fast.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
Well, next question. What mistakes would you tell our audience to avoid when entering retail? I mean, what are some of the things, give us a couple of things that you're like, oh man, if I had to do that over again, I wish I would have.
yeah, well, one thing I always suggest, hire people that to do tasks that you're not good at or that you don't want to do. So I was doing my own books and I was terrible at it. And there was a bookkeeper that I met that was officing right next door to my bakery. And she kept tracking me down and following me saying, you need me. Why don't you hire me? And I kept saying, yeah. Just leave me alone. I don't want to do that. I don't know what you would do. I told her the stupidest reasons why. I didn't want to deal with another person. Then I'd have to manage. And so in the very beginning, I was doing my books on Word document. I had no idea. I'm serious. I didn't know who owed me money. I didn't know if I was making money. It was just one part of the business that I wanted to put my head in the sand about and didn't want to deal with it. And so, that's a mistake I made. I like to tell people, quickly hire people that are doing those tasks that you don't like. Another bit of advice is don't listen to the naysayers. I had a lot of people in my life telling me I was crazy and that I should go work at a bank or go into tech. People kept telling me, you're not going to make enough money, Beryl, selling these oat bars. And, I kind of, it got in my head more than it should have. So you really got to follow your gut and go forward and don't listen to that because it's negative and
follow your heart, which you
follow-
obviously did.
Yeah.
Awesome. Krista, what do you got?
No, I think that's amazing. I guess what mental checklists should a small emerging brand kind of go through to get ready for retail? What do you suggest? What were your learnings?
Well, the most important thing is it has to taste good. And I know that sounds simple, but or if it's a product that's not food, it's got to work successfully. There's a lot of food and a lot of bars that don't taste good. And so what tastes good to me might not taste good to you. So what I suggest is get a big focus group, your neighbors. I was always going around to my neighbors. Do you like this? Does this taste good? And you got to do that. You've got to listen to others. We've all picked up something that we'll never buy again.
Sure.
So you want it to taste good. And then also, get your packaging together. Make sure your packaging pops. And again, ask friends and family, get advice before you launch. And then also it's good to have a little extra capital, before you start or have access to, because things go wrong and a lot of businesses fail because they run out of capital. I mean, I think it's the main reason businesses fail.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest challenge that as we interview, a lot of brand founders on our podcast, that's probably the number one thing we hear is, being underfunded or the challenge of getting funding for a new brand. It's not for the faint of heart.
Right. And if you can't show a lot of sales yet, if you don't have much revenue, it's risky for somebody to come in and invest in you. And so it's tough in the beginning. So that's why I always suggest go to a bank first if you can. It's hard these days to get a loan from a bank, but that's the first thing I would suggest. Then go to friends and family. And lastly, bring in an investor.
Okay, good advice. Great advice.
I mean, partners aren't always easy to be with.
Yes, exactly. So that goes into our next question, which is, what have you learned about raising money? I mean, so you talked about going to a bank first. So what's been your experience?
Well, that is how I did it. I did credit card, which I would not recommend, but that was kind of my first, when I first started, I used a little credit card debt, second mortgage, which isn't such a bad idea. But then I went to the bank, but I was self-funded for 12 years. And I would suggest doing that if you can.
Right.
However, like I said, I grew so slowly and maybe other people don't want to grow so slowly. I don't really know about that. I did because I was unsure if this is really what I wanted to do. So I kind of had one foot out maybe. And it was such a commitment to bring in a partner. But I do recommend bringing in a partner as a last resort, because then you're diluting your ownership.
Right, exactly. No, that's good. That's great advice. And a lot of, I think, founders that we've interviewed, again, don't realize the amount of capital that it takes to start a brand and how much retailers and distributors take of your money.
Yep. And it's expensive to be on the shelf. And the bigger you grow, the more they will ask.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's also, on the other hand, it's hard to grow without capital.
Right.
know,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I mean, if you really have to be funded to grow in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's amazing that you went 12 years with only your own, being self-funded. That is amazing.
Yeah, it was nice to own 100% of your company back then.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So last question, Krista.
Yeah. So Beryl, tell us what's been your greatest success because you've had many. So what's
Oh,
the best one?
that's a tough one, but I say it's just so great to put something in somebody's mouth that they actually like. That to me is success, is putting this great tasting oat bar in somebody's hands in Canada, in Florida. It's just amazing to me that people are buying something that I created, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
What a
awesome.
feeling that must be.
Yeah, that must be a great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I still love stories when people tell me, "Oh, I saw your bar in this tiny coffee shop in California," or they'll send me pictures of in Nebraska, a squirrel eating a boba bar. But it's just kind of I pinch myself, just this humble bar that my daughter and I baked up. And then of course she's now 34 with her own baby. And she just laughs and says, you did it all. She really didn't have much to do with it. So
Right.
it's a fun family discussion.
Right.
Aw.
Are any of your kids involved in the business?
No, other than, they like going to the bank. But no, because she was 14 when she created it and then went to high school and college. And when she was 14 and I was selling them locally, she was like, "That's weird, Mom. I mean, ooh, why are you selling those?" She was a 14-year-old who knew everything.
Right.
And
Typical teenager. Sure.
yeah, and I said, "I don't care. I'm going to keep going." And she would roll her eyes and think it was strange. And so, no, but now she likes to see her little picture on the package.
Is that your daughter on the front of the packaging?
Well, yeah, that actually is, but on some of the boxes, there's a black and white photo of us together when she was 14. But
Okay.
yeah, the girl is supposed to be a caricature of her.
Right.
She's
Oh, wow.
Bobo. We still call her Bobo.
Still call her.
Aw.
That's so
Bobo. Yeah.
that's so funny. Wow. Well, Beryl, this has been awesome. So many great nuggets of wisdom and insight, and your journey is just amazing. And you should be extremely proud of that. So, you've just created a fantastic brand. I'm a big fan of the brand. I buy it all the time in my local Whole Foods.
Thank
So
you.
it's great. Krista, any final thoughts?
No, just I love your humility, Beryl.
Oh,
This is my favorite part of you when I saw you in California back in March and just talking with you and just your honesty and humility from
oh
build,
yeah.
building a business from the ground up and I'm proud of you too. I think it's really incredible what you're doing and I can't wait for a company to come along and snag what you've built and you
Me
can
too.
I know we've talked about it so I know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's a great point too. Just from what I could just tell from Beryl, that owning and starting and creating a brand will humble you, won't it?
Oh
Beryl?
yeah. Oh yeah. You have many setbacks and lots of lost hours of sleep.
Mm,
And a lot of times you think, what am I doing? This is crazy. Should I give up?
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of tears, a lot of insecurity, but then the next day you shake it off and another store picks you up or you get a great comment from a fan and keep going.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's awesome. So Beryl, as we wrap up, how can people reach out to you if they have a question or just want to reach out and tell you how great your brand is? How can they reach you?
You could send by email beryl@eatbobos.com, Beryl.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. I do a lot of little consulting on the side.
That's awesome. So you're giving back.
Yeah,
from
I
what-
love helping people, young
Mhm.
entrepreneurs.
Well, we really appreciate you being on our podcast today, and we thank you so much. And to our listeners, look out for this interview coming up very soon. And again, continue to follow us on our LinkedIn page, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes at Road to Retail. And we really appreciate, again, Beryl, your time. And thank you, audience, for listening today. Thanks so much.
It was fun.
Thanks, Beryl.